welcome to the Unofficial Game Pass podcast with me, Connor Smith, and Odhrán Johnson.
Hello.
And this week we are looking at, well, I'll first say that each week we do look at a game on Xbox Game Pass and discuss it for about an hour and review it in a way. This week we're looking at Halo 2. It's been a month since we talked about Halo CE or whatever Halo game we talked about last, which means it's time to return to Halo. And obviously we are doing this to talk about every Halo game before Halo Infinite comes out at the end of the year, hopefully. So yeah, Halo 2 Anniversary as part of the Master Chief Collection. Now, this is an interesting one. Odhrán, when did you first play Halo 2? Was it soon after playing Halo CE? Did you play them in order?
No, I definitely didn't. The first time I played Halo 2 was actually on the Master Chief Collection. I had never played it until then because it was easy enough to play Halo CE because it got its remaster on 360 in like 2011. But yeah, no, I never... Halo 2 I think was the last game I touched before Halo 5. So, I mean, in fairness, it makes a lot more sense because obviously the remastered game has that sort of Halo 5 cutscene before it. So I think they were trying to target people like me who hadn't played the games before. But yeah, no, that was the first time I touched it. And I've never played it fully on its old graphics, on its original. So I've always played it on remastered. So maybe I don't know, maybe that's blasphemous in some elements of the internet. But yeah, no, the first experience I had with it was on MCC.
Well, I'm pretty sure I played it on the original Xbox because I've got my copy, which is a original Xbox case, but it's the Xbox Classics, which suggests I didn't play it on release. I probably played it sometime after, maybe soon before Halo 3 came out. I'm not really sure. I can't remember because I obviously was younger. I was younger at some point. But I will say that it's extremely weird going back to Halo 2 on MCC because all my kind of nostalgia and my kind of love of Halo 2 stems from putting the disc in the original Xbox and getting the Halo 2 menu up and having that like kind of really iconic Halo theme but slightly changed in Halo 2 because I remember that it goes into like a really high register. And it feels somewhat impersonal in Master Chief Collection to have kind of all these games cut up and put in into like missions, and you can't access the game's menu. And like think about when you experience a game, like the menu is such a core experience, and when you're like, it's probably fine for a new player. They don't have those relations to the menus, but as an old fan, like my nostalgic relations to those games. Like, think about the Halo 3 menu, and everyone just shares a screenshot of that Halo 3 menu, and, like, they just put it up, and all they put is, like, feels. or you know, remember the times with the lads. Like, that's the sort of power a menu can have. So, playing it on MCC, there's something impersonal about it. And going on it, obviously, this is the remaster. I can't play it on the original graphics at all. The colors look drained. The audio is just so toned down. Like the music is like barely heard. There's like this weird kind of graininess in the background in the audio. For some reason, I can play CE on the original graphics, but Halo 2 it just feels like it's aged massively. And compared to like the remastered graphics, which are beautiful, I mean, so colorful. In fact, playing it earlier, it made me excited for Infinite. It's just like, you know, the Halo can look this good and this colorful. Like, this is what I want it to look like and feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what were your first impressions when you played Halo 2? Obviously coming in, what Halo games had you played previously to this?
Well, so obviously every game I played previous to that would have been everything in the original bar 2, Reach, ODST, and 4. I hadn't played Halo Wars at the time, which I've since gone back to play. But the first time I played it, because funnily enough, I didn't have an Xbox One for I think 2, maybe 3 years into its life cycle. I think I got it around 2018, maybe 29. No, not 2019. It was definitely like end of 2017, beginning of 2018. And funnily enough, there was I don't know if you had them in the UK, Extravision. They were kind of like, I think they were linked with like HMV and whatnot. I think in a certain sense. All right, so okay, well, obviously, only living across the sea, stuff doesn't travel very far. But Extravision at the time was sort of this. It was almost like a Blockbuster. Like you'd rent DVDs and what out of it, and you could buy stuff from it as well. And their sort of brand started to close down, so everything was like 70 to 90% off. So I think in like 2017, I was able to pick up MCC for a tenner, which is class considering I think it still goes for more than that now, even if you want to get it secondhand. And I got it new, so I was delighted. And I bought it with the purpose of, well, I'm going to get an Xbox One eventually, so I'll have it for when I get that. And then when I got my Xbox One, I loaded it up, and I think I went through the games in order again. But when I got to Halo 2, my first initial impression, which I think is really strange, because I thought it was the longest Halo game because it's got 15 missions, which in terms of, I think like 4 of them are cutscenes, or at least remastered blur cutscene cinematics. And even with that, if you take into 4, that's 11 missions, which is still quite a bit. But it's actually one of the shorter Halo games, I found out, because Halo 4 is extremely long. I think like each mission in that game is like at least 20 to 30 minutes long. And there's, I think in Halo 2 you can get through some of the missions in not as quickly as ODST, which is just for anyone who's wondering, a good way of getting legendary challenges done on ODST is to just play Uplift Reserve on like repeat, because it takes like 3 minutes to finish. Sorry, I'm getting off topic here, but yeah, no, I loaded it up pretty much the first time, and I think my first impression of it was I had always liked the Arbiter. The first game I played was, at least on my own Xbox, was Halo 3, so the Arbiter was always intriguing to me. As is the case, I think, with a lot of people, side characters are always like, especially in a game where the main character doesn't talk that much, side characters are always the real draw for a lot of people. So I loved the Arbiter. You know, this was before I found out, you know, he was a genocidal alien, but like even after that, you know, you still have that sort of love-hate relationship with the Arbiter. And so I was all pumped up to play his bits of the campaign. And even though I was sort of a big Halo fan, I think it's one of those, I don't know what it is, like, you know, I really liked Halo at the time, and I still do, but I never had Halo 2 spoiled for me. I never knew what was like Halo at the time. I think even now I still struggle to figure out what's going on in half the Halo games half the time. Like but at least in Halo 2 I had no idea what happened in that until I played it. So I kind of got a fresh experience with it, which was good. I think it's such a great like title for like a testing ground for what they thought might be good in Halo, and kind of what stuck and what didn't. Like, you know, obviously it's the first time dual wielding was introduced. That stuck into Halo 3, and I think, you know, it kind of got thrown out after that because of imbalance issues on multiplayer. There was also sort of the introduction of sort of semi-boss fights. Tartarus is one of them. Regret is the other. They didn't make it into really the into Halo 3 or whatnot. But I loved the stuff they were willing to do, because in comparison to Halo CE, Halo CE is a great sort of baseline for any Halo game. But like Halo 2 kind of took that and times it by 20. And I think the only thing I think that a lot of people have problem with is the ending, because it's so abrupt. But obviously we know now in hindsight that was due to the limitations they had at the time of, you know, they had to get it released. And I think even there was some engine issues at the time where they couldn't do it. So, I mean, if it's any consolation, we ended up getting Halo 3 out of it. So I think everyone walks away happy. But yeah, that was my first sort of my first my first draw to it, my first sort of impressions of it.
Yeah, I think, you know, they had a problem going into this sequel because they've got, obviously it started strong with Halo Combat Evolved, but I mean the story there is pretty bare bones, pretty minimal. It's there to get you from A to B, and it has all the kind of narrative sci-fi kind of twists that you want. But it's not revolutionary. So when it comes to Halo 2, it's like, well, what do you do? Because the first one, the Halo ring's destroyed, and Chief and Cortana are adrift in space. Like, that feels pretty... You can go either anywhere with it, or it feels pretty final. Halo 2 opens with Chief getting awarded for his bravery on a space station around Earth, and then very quickly you're thrust into battle because the Covenant, the alien race that you've been fighting in Combat Evolved, have made their way to Earth and sort of embark on a invasion. So, I mean, that's a great opening. Like, the fact that you spent the first game all in this Halo ring, quite detached from humanity, and then you're back on Earth around sort of all the people that you were trying to save in the first one, although they were just like an obscure idea because they were so far away. Now you're back on Earth and the Covenant is on Earth. Like, that's a fantastic opening. But even more interesting and more important than that is the fact that you've got the Arbiter as another playable character, which I think probably people weren't expecting going into this, where you played, the first Combat Evolved all as Chief. And in the second one, you're playing as the leader of the army that you were opposing in the first game. And obviously has been disgraced because he failed. And, I mean, it becomes very apparent that the Arbiter's story in this is probably... I think he's got more missions than Chief. And his story is probably more interesting than Chief's is in this game, because it's a story about religion, politics, kind of soul-searching and having your faith challenged. And it's really interesting to be able to play as one of the elites that you were killing in the first game, and you have the energy sword, and it's really cool. You have the ability to go invisible. It's a welcome refresher that I wouldn't expect to see so early in the series. Like, they've gone to a sequel where already they've changed things up by making the narrative so much more expanded, where they kind of lean into the I suppose they lean into the sci-fi epic. I always think of Halo as like a fantasy sci-fi epic narrative. Although, it is not without its, say, if Reach is like a war film, or, it has its genres that it plays into. But what do you think about... I think looking back, it's much easier to say that the Arbiter makes for fun gameplay. But I know at the time, certainly, I think my dad, who loved Combat Evolved, never really made it to Halo 2 or Halo 3 because I think the Arbiter was a controversial and maybe alienating addition to the game. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's no secret. Obviously, I've already mentioned that I'm a big fan of the Arbiter, but I think that's a lot for the narrative element he introduces into Halo. Like, because obviously you look at CE is very simple. First of all, from a gameplay perspective. But then secondly, also from a narrative perspective, it's not exactly this groundbreaking story. It's pretty much just, humanity's on its last legs, to stop this ring from killing everyone at the end. Like, and as you mentioned, the Arbiter's story in Halo 2 brings in so much more engaging themes. As you mentioned, the religious aspect of the Arbiter is brought into question, the questioning of faith, politics, and all that. Like, truth is very much a Machiavellian, stereotype encapsulated. Like, he'll do anything for power, and that's pretty much what that whole story or narrative surrounding the Arbiter is about. And then even if you were to take it from the standpoint of, not even just the Arbiter, but the elites are very much used as a scapegoat for the Prophet's failures to, first of all, take over the Halo ring, and then to take over Earth. They sort of use them as this sort of leverage tool to keep everyone else on board. And I think, in fairness to the Anniversary Edition, with the inclusion of terminals, they're able to really expand on those sort of themes they're talking about. Like, there's a really good terminal on the Uprising of the Ungoi. There's also a really good one. I can't remember the heretic's name in that mission, but there's a really good terminal in which it kind of depicts how he first finds 343 Guilty Spark, and they kind of literally just talk. And for the most part, in an action shooter like Halo, you might think, well, that's a bit boring, but it sows the seeds of doubt in that heretic's mind. And to me, the only annoying bit about Halo 2 is the fact that the heretic is so quick to just shoot the Arbiter rather than kind of do the same thing that you see in those terminals, because it would make a lot more sense, because the Arbiter's already questioning whether he wants to be part of the Covenant or not. But I really like it. I think if I was to compare it to another Halo title, I think one that we see a lot, getting justifiably a lot more praise now, is Halo 4. I think for a long time, people didn't like the change to Chief in Halo 4, because Chief had very much been the sort of the player that, or the character that the player inhabits. And I do understand that to an extent. I mean, I don't think I have this very much personal connection to the Chief. I always just saw him as the main character of Halo. And I saw him as, obviously, I think you mentioned it a couple episodes ago, Connor, as the Clint Eastwood sort of that universe. And outside of that, he was kind of just, as was intended, sort of the body for the player to inhabit. But I think Halo 4 probably is one of the richest narratives in the Halo universe. There's a lot of deep themes about, struggling with mental health. And there's also bits about, I think at the time of Halo 4's recording, it was the lead writer's, I think his mother had dementia. So it was kind of come to terms with that as well. So there's more deeper writing, not to the extent where it's like overly intrusive, but it tells an engaging narrative. And I think if you look back at Halo 2, a lot of people at the time didn't like the inclusion of the Arbiter because it ripped you away from the Chief. And I think, unfortunately, for the most part, and I don't mean this in a bad way, because I think people have the right to, first of all, enjoy something and then maybe get disappointed when it's not what they're expecting. That's obviously going to be the nature of games. But I appreciate that Bungie, first of all, wanted to tell a more rich story about the enemy you're facing, the Covenant. Because now a lot of people will say that Halo 2 is their favourite game in the series. And I think justifiably so, because there is such a good level of lore and detail put into that. And there's some really good, I think, there's some really good combat sections in that game as well. But I think we might see something similar to that, like with Halo 4 in a couple of years. I know it's already starting to get much more love than it did when it first came out now. Like the PC release for Halo 4 is testament to that. A lot of people got on board with that because they loved. I think there's a small sector community that's really deep into, or really a really core fan base of the visuals of Halo 4, the story Halo 4 and whatnot, and that's starting to get a bit more love. And maybe Halo 5 kind of unfortunately undid a lot of the good that Halo 4 did. But I genuinely think, if we were to look at a more modern example of that, I think Halo 4 is a good example. I'm a big fan of Halo 2. Granted, it's not my favourite game of the series. I think actually it's probably it's like my second least played in the series as well. Like I really enjoy the story, but I can never find myself going back to play it, because I think further games like Halo 3, even Halo 3 ODST do better campaign structure, and it's a lot more enjoyable to go back and play those missions. But yeah, I kind of sorry, I kind of forgot the question you asked, and I kind of just kept rambling. But I hope it's still on point, at least to a little bit.
No, I really enjoyed just all the thoughts, because it was like I had so many thoughts there, because obviously Halo 4 and kind of the larger narrative of Halo now, I think many people have said this, and I generally accept that Halo now is almost the story of Cortana. Although that's unfair to say that in every game. I feel like Halo 2 is the Arbiter's story. And this is definitely a thing in literature where either you get on with a book or you don't. And really, the good reader, if you're gonna study something, there's it's not a case of will you get on with it or not. It's you have to embrace what the writer wants to show you, and let yourself be led to where they want to take you. So if you go into a game with expectations and the game's actually doing something different than what you want, that can be jarring. But probably the most objective perspective you can get on it is the neutral player who will go, I will accept anything and judge with kind of fresh eyes on what it's doing. So really embracing the Arbiter's narrative as kind of the narrative of this game. I think it's, it probably couldn't have a stronger narrative. It is phenomenal in all the cutscenes and all the writing and all the voice acting as well. I mean, Arbiter is probably my favorite Halo character, and that's due to the great kind of voice talent of Keith David, and there's that brilliant Halo Legends film with the was that the Arbiter in that film?
It was, yeah,
anyway,
but it wasn't Tel Vadami.
Yeah, well, it had like an elites with samurais, so like having like elites be these warriors about honor and justice, and they're so cool characters. So the Arbiter, definitely favorite character, and every time I see an Arbiter, even in the first Halo Wars, even though he was a baddie, is just awesome. Loved the cutscenes with him in. So yeah, I think the story in this game is really strong. I thought what you said about the campaign structure, I do want to get into that, because I was looking through the missions today, and normally I can go onto a Halo campaign, I can go onto the playlist or the missions, and I can go, oh, I really want to jump into Truth and Reconciliation, or I really want to jump into the Covenant. Like I'll definitely do that with 1 and 3 and maybe Reach. Like I'll have those favorite missions I'll gravitate to. And I looked on Halo 2 and I was like, well, I don't know if I even have a favorite mission, because like I'll play the campaign beginning to end, but there isn't a level structure or a map that particularly interests me, or any one level that really stands out to me. And I think that's a bit of a shame, really. I don't know why that is. I mean, I jumped into the playlist they have on MCC, which is like fan favorites, and I had a good time, but I have to say, Halo 2's campaign is in the mission structures themselves is probably one of the campaigns I enjoy the least in terms of gameplay. Like, I feel that's harsh for like one of the games that people hold up as probably the best in the series, or one of the best. I know probably Halo 3 is everyone's favorite, or at least most people's favorite. But for me, there are definitely missions in there that aren't interesting. Like, there's a lot of missions where the Arbiter is facing the Flood and very similar environments. And even though I had fun when I played it earlier, there was a structure in the missions where you had sort of you go from A to B and you have to fight sort of waves of different enemies. And I felt like I had more fun with CE because it was more open. I had fun with 3 because they kind of reached this kind of master point with the gameplay where all the sandbox elements just fit together so nicely. And Halo 2 is kind of that black sheep, because it's kind of that transition between a very open game to quite a linear game, but with really refined sandbox elements. And I can't really put my finger on why the missions aren't that successful to me, so I'm gonna throw the ball over to you and see if you can. What is your experience of the missions like? Because I know you said that the campaign structure is not fantastic.
Yeah, I see. This is the thing when I kind of like when I'm going back to play one of the older Halo games. I think the one reason I think that really throws me off CE going back to it is that for the most part, a lot of those missions are extremely long. So I don't really want to jump into them, like if I just want to play a mission. The problem with Halo 2 is the missions, I think, whilst they look good on remastered, I feel like they're a little uninspired. Like, as you say, like, the first Halo game has this great, like, vast openness for you to explore. I think very much of the silent cartographer, which you just puts you on an island and says go at it, like. And Halo 3, the one mission that sticks out to me is the Covenant, which is where you're pretty much put into so many different areas. I think you face off against 2 Scarbs in that mission. You go into Forerunner structures, you're on sand, you're on grass, you're literally anywhere and everywhere. And as you mentioned, that's refining their sandbox elements to make a really good linear experience that feels open world. I think for Halo 2, the problem with it is that it tries to stick to the familiarity of CE. Like, if we take, for example, first of all, like, they both have extremely similar opening missions in the sense that the Chief gets his armor, or the Chief wakes up and whatnot, and he's on a ship and he needs to escape. Granted, there's 2 different elements to that. The ship doesn't blow up in the end, but that's a narrative figment. The sort of structure of it is quite similar. I think I like the Arbiter's story, but as you mentioned, those flood missions are just so unbelievably, especially on repeated playthroughs, are just a slog to get through. And I think that's why a lot of people don't attempt Legendary on Halo 2, not just because of the Jackal snipers, which I know are their own problem, but the repetitiveness of those levels. Like, I don't know what it is about the early Halo games. I think in general, flood missions in Halo have never been my favorite. I always find them quite annoying to do. Because in Halo CE, there's obviously the problem with the library, which is extremely repetitive. And that comes into effect. I think a problem with CE though in general is because of the low assets they have to use for the original Xbox. Those missions are going to look repetitive, and even in the remaster section, like, as glossy as the visuals are, it's still the same corridor you're going through again and again. Halo 2 has a lot of really annoying gondola or lift sections, which just have you sitting in the one area for a good 10 to 15 minutes fighting against waves, which is fine if you're into that, but I've never been the hugest fan of that outside of Firefight. I think Halo 3 does it okay, but the Cortana mission in Halo 3 is one of the worst, I think, in that game in general. And I think it's just from my disdain of the Flood. Like, I love the Flood as a narrative choice, and as like sort of a horror element. Like, but just when you're playing against them, once you've seen them once, the shock value kind of goes away of them. And I think that's the biggest problem for me with those missions. I don't think it's more so a problem with Halo's missions as it is the limitations of the engine at the time. Like, Halo 2 obviously has to be bigger and better than CE, but I think CE was already, literally scraping what the Xbox could do, to be honest, in terms of how much could be on screen at once. So I think in a sense they made certain elements smaller to give them more detail. And I think in one sense the enemies are horribly unbalanced when it comes to a lot of things. Like, the brutes are just ridiculously tanky. It kind of feels like they're bullet sponges a lot of the time whenever I play against them, unless you've got like a brute shot or a rocket launcher. But like, if you've got a BR, which is we need to remember that the AR is completely not in this game anymore. It's been taken out in favor of the SMG, which I'm not against, because I didn't particularly like the AR in Combat Evolved. It's kind of shit, for lack of a better word. I'll let you jump in on that in a second, because that seemed like a really controversial statement. In fairness, I don't think the AR is particularly great in any of the Halo games. So I mean, say that as you will, it gets very much overshone by the DMR or the BR, particularly in Halo 3, which we can talk about in a later video. But yeah, I don't know. Everyone always tells me that their favorite battle rifle is the Halo 2 battle rifle. I don't know if how much of that is based on the multiplayer aspect of Halo or the actual campaign aspect. I certainly think it's all right. I'd be more of a fan of Halo 5's style of BRs. I think they feel a little bit more nice to use. Halo 3's is all right, but I don't know. I never feel like the guns in Halo 3 really give me much of a feedback element. I can say by what I'm saying is Conor is dying to jump in, so I'll hand it back over.
No, I just love that we have this series where you can, like, all the different fans, and this is why the fan base gets kind of competitive and toxic, is that we all have kind of our own likes and dislikes and like our favorites. So I'm sitting here wincing at all your opinions, but I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that a series can be so diverse as to give, like, who could think like a shooter game can have so many different kind of feels and different gameplay and stories. That's a huge high for Halo, that every game is a bit different, because after a while I think Gears of War or Call of Duty, it's just Gears of War again but with something new, whereas Halo can change. You see that in ODST and Reach, it can be different things, and I think we should value that more rather than criticizing that it should always be one thing. Bugger, I forgot the point I was going to make now. That's terrible. I will say I love the... Oh no, I remember now. I love the assault rifle in Halo CE, because it's so beefy. You just kind of hold down that thing and it just sprays everywhere and you just charge into your enemies. Like, that's... MCC has told me that the assault rifle is my favourite weapon. I'm not ashamed of it. It's fantastic. You mow down all the grunts with the assault rifle, and then you come across an elite and you need to change. You shouldn't be saying that the assault rifle is weak. It's like, no, it's a good standard weapon, but it forces you to change to something more powerful.
But does by changing to something more powerful not entail that it is indeed weak?
No, because it's ammo management. You can't just use a battle rifle all the time.
The thing, the CE assault rifle has 600 bullets, like, in reserve. I don't think it's ammo management you need to worry about.
Yeah. No, on specifically the dullness of Flood missions, I think I said this when we were doing CE, is that the Flood missions do feel really bland when you come across the same enemy type for a whole mission. Yeah. And obviously the aesthetic of a Flood campaign mission is that kind of dark, cold, kind of tainted Forerunner Cellar sort of thing. The mission I enjoyed most in Halo CE was Keys, because you come across the Covenant and the Flood fighting, and having that kind of that variation in the enemy types. You can kind of swoop in, and do you fight the Flood first? Do you fight the Covenant? Do you kind of try and kill both of them? And it's got kind of those pools of green. I don't know what the green stuff is, but it's pools of green that they added just to make the level feel different from Truth and Reconciliation. But when you come to Halo 2, there's a genuine problem in that you're playing as the Covenant or the Arbiter, but you're not fighting humanity. So you have to fight a heretic faction of the Covenant. So you are fighting the same enemy type until you come across the Flood. Then when you get to the Flood, you're fighting the Sentinels, which aren't very interesting, just because non-sentient enemies aren't very interesting to fight. I don't find the Prometheans in Halo 4 to be very interesting enemies. And I don't find the Flood to be an interesting enemy, just because they... when you're fighting the Covenant and they have those kind of group relations, and they're shouting words at you, and they're in an alien language, or sometimes they say demon or whatever. That was
flawless
Joe Staten is it's just more fun. And Cortana in Halo 3, it's such a disappointing level for what is a fantastic campaign, because every mission is action packed, and then you come across Cortana, which is just like, oh my god, get me out of this kind of flood infested ship. It's so tedious. But I think Keys in CE is like testament to a Flood level done right, in my mind. It's just such a shame that they kind of keep going back to the library in terms of the Flood mission archetype, which is just really disappointing. I don't enjoy it. And as you said, the brutes are bullet sponges in this game, and they're quite scary when they're charging at you, to be honest. And they haven't got to that satisfying point in Halo 3 where they have the armor and it's kind of charged, so that when you shoot their armor down, it kind of bursts really satisfyingly, and they kind of turn into that kind of charging unarmored brute. It's that all the things that Halo 3 did improved on the Halo 2 formula. I think Halo 2 is a great kind of very linear, kind of more actiony. It's kind of less ethereal and mysterious than Halo CE. It's kind of more military when you're playing as the chief. I don't know how I'd describe the Arbiter. The Arbiter missions feel quite lonely a lot of the time. It feels like almost the journey of a pilgrim, or like a pilgrimage, or some sort of monk, and obviously in sci-fi terms, trying to find the truth about their situation. And I think that it's mostly successful. But it's such a shame that the cutscenes and the story and the writing, the voice acting, are like up here, and then the actual missions like tend to be quite tedious. Like I almost think of them as like almost doing chores. And yeah, there's quite an unbalance. Say definitely if you're doing Legendary, it's extremely punishing. Like people say Halo 3 Legendary is hard. It's not. It's not. Halo 3 Legendary is easy. Halo 2 Legendary is, me and my girlfriend played the whole campaign. Well, we did every campaign on MCC on Legendary co-op. And we fell out. We had arguments over Halo 2. I turned into a horrible boyfriend. I was just like, look, just stay back and don't even come into the room. Let me deal with the enemies. Because it has this weird thing where if one of you dies, I think it might be like the Iron or something Skull later on in Halo 3. If one of you dies, it resets the checkpoint. So you can't hang about and wait for your partner to spawn on you. You can't die at all, otherwise it will reset the checkpoint. So playing it on co-op, you get no kind of you get no more assistance or help than if you're playing it solo. It's truly punishing. Jackal snipers, obviously one hit enemy. You have to memorize where they are and shoot them before they can shoot you. It's extremely punishing, especially I think the mission Gravemind, where you're thrown into a room, you don't even have time to jump into cover, and just the spacing of the checkpoints, it's brutal. I think even playing on normal, I surprised myself, because if you get too close to an elite, one melee, you're dead. The Scorpion on like one of the early missions, you try and get across the bridge on the Scorpion. I can get across the bridge with the Scorpion still intact on Legendary, but I lost concentration for like a second when I was playing it on normal today, and the Scorpion was on fire immediately. It just feels like, I know that Bungie had to really crunch to get this game out. Like they built a whole E3 demo showing off a game that actually they couldn't end up using, and they had to start from scratch to build up a game that they could actually put out. And we've talked about the culture of producing something for E3 and then actually having to produce the game and their separate entities. We've talked about that in the larger industry, and crunch is never good for the game or the health of the developers. And I think as a result you have a game with quite a few missions, but actually there's not a lot interesting going on inside those missions, which is a shame. I think the remaster does good things. It adds the terminals, which, as you said, it adds those welcome bits of lore. It expands on the story and brings Tim Dodabo back to do 343. It's good stuff. One thing that I heard Marty O'Donnell say in an interview, I think it might have been an interview with Hidden Xperia, was that and this was personally his opinion, was that they wished the developers kept the cutscenes rendered in game. And I know that some people kind of have the opinion that rendered cutscenes are always better. And I generally do have that opinion, just because, like, if you look at Halo Infinite, there's no, well, I mean, in the E3 gameplay trailer, there's obviously a graphical difference between. No, I don't think there is, actually. I think that actually just what we saw back at no, it wasn't E3. Sorry, it was the Xbox showcase. I think what we saw just wasn't graphically matching the first few trailers we got. But saying that, the actual gameplay and the cutscenes, you know, they seamlessly go into each other. They are the same rendered, you know, in-engine stuff. So when you look at Halo 2 and you've got these remastered blur cutscenes where it loads a pre-done cutscene, which is just like a Halo film, say. I mean, they look fantastic. I mean, you can go on YouTube, you can watch all the Halo 2 cutscenes in like one video. They are brilliant. They are like a film, and obviously, as much as we've praised the story and the writing and everything, they're well worth the watch, and they almost feel like really, really nice rewards for getting through the sometimes quite tedious levels. Now, personally, I don't feel that the blur cutscenes are a hindrance. Just because when you get into the game, the graphics are so colourful, they do look so good that, you know, you can imagine like the film cutscenes are the same world as the game. It's not that jarring because the game itself looks so good. But generally, I wouldn't like to see it in future, just because it can create that sense of the character I'm playing as is not the same as when I view those cutscenes. And an example of this, I think, is at the very end of the game, after the last boss fight. Depending on the elites that actually survive that boss fight, it decides who appears in the final cutscene. So if you keep one elite alive, for instance, they're there in that cutscene. So it creates a continuity with the game that's lost if you just pack in blur cutscenes. I don't know if you have a strong opinion about the cutscenes or the remastered edition.
I really like them, in fairness. And I think they're even, like, my love of them is even more heightened by the fact that they're used so well in Halo Wars 2. I think the first thing I thought when you said that if you kill an elite in, like, say, CE or whatever, it'll be in the cutscene, is when you're on the silent cartographer and they close the door and you have to go find the control room, but you can still shoot the elite through the door and he doesn't move. So there's usually a cutscene where the door opens and the elite comes out with his energy sword, but if he's dead, the door just opens and nothing happens. So it's just a really awkward cutscene. Which, I mean, I enjoy that, yeah. But I would also, like, if you were to say to me, would you like to see blur cinematic cutscenes for Halo Combat Evolved? I would be like, yes, 100%, give that to me now. Because I think if you even look at some of the, like, just the rendered pictures of that people have done of, like, really high quality Mark V armor for Halo CE, or even, like, sort of pictures of the Chief in Halo CE and really high quality, like Pixel Flare comes to mind. He does a load of stuff like that. Like, I want to see stuff like that in, like, cutscenes. I think that looks amazing. I'm not too worried about, like, the only thing that I think kind of annoys me a little bit is, say, like, it's not even annoyance, it's more just of a, like, a sort of little continuity error when you have those sort of cutscenes. It's like, say you have, like, a carbine and then in the cutscene you have, like, a battle rifle. It's like, well, I didn't have that. It's not something that's going to completely destroy the immersion. But I feel like that would be a nice little switch if they maybe, even if that was incorporated in some way. I don't know how that would work. I don't think it can work because they're obviously videos that they're incorporating into it. So there's no way you can predict how that's going to happen. And if you're making, like, cutscenes like that with the ability to change that, you might as well just make the game look like that at that stage. No, I think it's an okay thing to it's okay to sacrifice maybe that tiny level of detail for this amazing looking, high quality cinematic style cutscene. Because there's been times where I've gone back and I've just watched the cutscenes for Halo 2 because I really like the story of it. And thankfully enough, in Halo 2, the narrative is so well put together that, yeah, the missions seem a little bit tedious, but you can watch like one cutscene to another and it'll feel like maybe like even an episodic series or whatnot. Which is, you know, more than you can say for, say, something like CE or Halo 3 even. Because there's such big levels of content and story that are put into like the actual open world gameplays you're playing, which I feel like 2 doesn't have that as much. I think it's kind of like, go do this, and then you do it, and there's not much sort of story elements in between that. And then you get to the end cutscene, it's like, then it wraps up. So I think it works for them. I don't know if it would work for other Halo games. Saying that though, I would love to see a remastered CE or 3 or ODST or whatnot.
Well, I personally, I don't think it would work for CE because I think there are a lot of times in those games where you do go into a cutscene mid-mission. So think about like when, even first mission, Pillar of Autumn, you pick up the pistol from Captain Keyes and it's, you know, a continuous cutscene, and then it switches to your visor where you're handed the Magnum. I don't think that would work with a Blur cutscene. I think it works in this game because they bookend the missions. I think, you know, just generally it's quite nice. It works. It doesn't really halt you getting into the game or getting out of the game. They load pretty quickly on Series X, so I'm not worried about it, to be fair. Now, we've talked a lot about campaign. I want to talk about the multiplayer, but I also want to attack sort of what the core gameplay is at the same time. So I'll come out with this because I know that. So Halo 2 multiplayer is extremely important. It kind of blew up on Xbox Live, kind of one of the original multiplayer experiences that people could have online, and people to this day kind of champion the Halo 2 multiplayer as the best. And I know that personally I've never gotten into them, but there are kind of button combos that you can use to help you succeed in multiplayer matches, sort of faster rate of fire with a battle rifle, faster switching reload or whatever, you know, crazy stuff like XXBY. I don't know. I've never used them. I was like, button combos? No, that's cheating. I'll pretend that I'm I'm
an ethical player.
Yeah. I'll come out and say it. I don't like Halo 2 multiplayer, to be fair. I'll say that because well, especially on MCC, it just feels brutal. Like, I get killed so quickly, and there's very little. I think in Halo 3 there are such small things like the audio indication that you've died or that you've killed someone through medals, or even hearing the sniper shot from the person that killed you helps, rather than just seeing your dead body and it being like a jarring experience where you didn't even see or hear who shot you. Like, that happens so many times, and it's weird because I love the CE multiplayer, I love the Halo 3 multiplayer, but come to Halo 2, it feels, I suppose this is why people like it, it feels competitive, it feels rough. Like, every time I get into it, I feel like I've been hard done by. I don't know what your experience is.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where it's not too polished to the point where it feels imbalanced. Now, getting on to, there are certainly imbalances, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but it has one of those things where it's raw enough that it has like all the core elements of multiplayer that we know today, but it's not like trying to incorporate anything that could possibly break up the balance of gameplay. I think the only thing I can really think of is dual wielding is extremely overpowered in Halo 2. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a battle rifle, shotgun, you can get absolutely shredded by dual SMGs wherever you are. I think as well, map design has a big thing to do with how popular Halo 2's multiplayer was. That and 3 certainly have like I mean, if you look at, like, no offense to CE, but if you look at some of CE's maps, like, one of them is just like a clusterfuck of teleporters. One of them is like, I think the only one people really know is the elevated high ground where the sniper and the rocket launcher are. That map with the sort of two towers on each end. And I mean, Blood Gulch as well, I suppose, is probably the main one. But like outside of that, I think Halo 2 kind of propelled at least what modern Halo maps look like. Like you've got sort of the, like, they're not big enough to where, like, sort of say like Halo 3 Snowbound or whatnot. They're not that big, and the fact that players can get lost very easily, you always kind of feel like you're in constant combat. And in fairness, the limited weapon supply in Halo 2 is obviously less than 3, more than 2, but it strikes that balance as to where, like, oh, if somebody gets a, like, you know, if you get the sword, yes, you have the sword, but, you know, there's things like sword blocking, there's certainly ranged elements to where the sword is not useful. I think it's a lot more balanced to say, like, something like in Halo 5, if you get, like, the, what's the Promethean rocket launcher or whatever it's called, the incineration cannon. Like, if you get that, you've pretty much got maybe at least one kill in the bag. I mean, if you don't, you're actually tragic with using it. But like stuff like Halo 5 obviously is a much more fast-paced game, so I don't really want to compare too much to 2. But I mean, I feel like the weapon sandbox in Halo 2 is more balanced. I suppose everyone has access to dual wielding, so that makes it a bit more balanced, but it kind of, it does have, it's one of those games where I think you can enjoy it if you have like similar levels of play style, but it's kind of from that golden era of games where, like, if you were really good at the game, you could go into a game against like very much new players and just shit on them, and like there would be no repercussions for if you were really bad at the game or not. And, you know, skill-based matchmaking is a completely different sort of story, and there's ups and downs to that. But I think 2, for the most part, is kind of what propelled modern day esports. Like, that's why it's such a shame to never see Halo featured as much. Like, I think if you look at some of the most recent HCS competitions, like especially Halo 5, like sometimes you may get 10-15 people at them nowadays. Like those they used to sell out like stadiums or whatnot for Halo 2 ones. They were so big at the time. And of course, I don't mean to say that in the fact that, you know, Halo 5 is a particularly bad game. I think maybe its longevity and how long it's been out has something to do with its, you know, decline in popularity. And granted, it didn't have a very good launch either. So, you know, Halo 2 was always constantly, at least the multiplayer aspect was very much always a core aspect of Halo and always was loved. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I don't really enjoy Halo 2's multiplayer, to be honest. Like, it's not like, whenever I go into MCC, it's that and CE are the ones I turn off rotation straight away, because I just, like, I know you enjoy CE, but I mean, I don't like going into CE because I think the maps are trash. I think it's just, this is going to be the episode where we fall out, Connor. But I think besides Blood Gulch, and I think Blood Gulch is only considered good because it's nostalgic and because of Red versus Blue. I don't think it's a particularly redefining map, to be honest. I think when it comes to Halo 2, like, maybe because I didn't grow up with it, or maybe it's because I only played it when MCC came out, that I have such a disconnect with its multiplayer. Like, I feel like once I got to Halo 2, Halo 3 had kind of really engrossed me a bit more. Same with 4 and 5. Like, I actually really like Halo 4's multiplayer. And it's very much a much more conventional multiplayer to, like, the likes of, like, Call of Duty or whatnot. So, it's a blended element of Halo in that, I think. But yeah, no, it's kind of my thoughts on the multiplayer. I think it's definitely an improvement on CE. But again, if you were to ask me, I don't think that's very difficult. I think I think 3 does it better, though. I think dual wielding was a little bit nerfed in 3, but I think taking out dual wielding was probably the best option they've made with regards to Halo games. That being said, I think it has a place in campaign, just not multiplayer.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I have to say, when I was playing Halo 2 on the original Xbox, my Xbox was never set up for an online connection or for multiplayer or anything. So coming to Halo 2 multiplayer when I'm older, it's like, you know, this is something I never did when my original playthrough for Halo 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any nostalgic memories of it, and that perhaps affects my opinion of it. But even CE, even though I didn't play like big multiplayer LAN matches or like have anyone like have friends over or anything, I played that a lot, just me and my dad on all the maps, and that was enough fun for me that I have enough of a connection with those maps. And it's possible I just didn't have the same thing with Halo 2 because it was like a campaign game for me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's iconic map designs in there that have been sort of redone in Halo Reach, I think, and titles up to, I think, maybe Halo 5 still has like Halo 2 maps in there. So yeah, it's a solid multiplayer. I just think it's aged, and when I go into Halo multiplayer, I want to play CE, I want to play 3. I won't knock a match of 4, but CE and 3 are my favourites in terms of campaign and multiplayer, just because I love the gameplay. But obviously when we're talking about Halo 2 multiplayer, we're talking about kind of two different versions, because we're talking about the original Halo 2 multiplayer, and then unlike CE, which didn't have a remastered multiplayer, we have Halo 2 remastered multiplayer maps and sort of the remastered graphics for Halo 2. For me, playing Halo 2 remastered on multiplayer, there's a weird experience because it doesn't have much of a connection for me to the Halo 2 campaign. Like, for instance, the assault rifle was thrown in there. I don't think it was in the original Halo 2 multiplayer. And everything to me just looks like Halo 4. So that when I was playing multiplayer earlier, I was thrown into a match of Halo 2 Anniversary, and then I was thrown into a match of Halo 4. And I've got different button configurations for both of those games. And I was kind of pressing buttons. I was like going, what's going on with my controller? And then I realised I was on Halo 4. So that's how I can't tell them apart. And I think that it was probably done in the same engine. But the fact that kind of they seem to have changed the reticles and added hit markers, it just doesn't feel like Halo 2 anymore. Now I'm up for a remastered Halo 2 multiplayer. And I enjoy the Halo 2 Anniversary multiplayer. I think it's nice with the audio and the visuals, and it's fun. But it doesn't feel like Halo 2. It feels like Halo 4. Just without the sprint and the abilities. I don't know what your opinion of the remastered is.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I see as you, the same as you. I don't have much of a history with it, so my opinion on it is kind of based on what I know from MCC. I will say AR was not in the original Halo 2 multiplayer, so that's a completely new, different change. And there's a whole lot of balancing issues that comes with introducing the AR into a game that didn't have it to begin with. Because for the most part, BR starts nowadays are... I think in fairness, what they did a good job in making it that you spawn with the AR, because the one thing I think that Halo 3 did poorly was spawning you with the BR and then either having the AR as a secondary or having it something you can pick up, because the BR is such a meta in all the Halo games it's in, or the DMR in Halo Reach's case, that picking up the assault rifle is pretty much useless when you have the other weapon, because you'll get outmatched at pretty much most ranges unless you're extremely close to them. And even at that case, it's down to pure dumb luck some of the time that you could end up winning the gunfight. I think, first of all, I want to say I think it's the Halo 2 Anniversary multiplayer has been criminally criminally kept in MCC. Like, there's not been anything new for that multiplayer since nearly its release. I think the unfortunate bit about it is, I think now at this stage, I think 343 have kind of, conceded the fact that the only game that most people are playing on MCC is 3, and they're just 3 and Reach really and they're just kind of playing to that audience, because as you see, like, we're getting all this new stuff for Halo 3. I think a lot of the people even at the time thought that those original Halo Online armors should have gone to Halo 2 Anniversary, at least, because they actually would suit that art style quite well. This is from someone as well that actually doesn't really mind having those Halo Online armors in Halo 3. I think, more options the better. But like Halo 2 Anniversary's neglect on MCC is up there with, say, like Elite Armor's neglect, like, because you never see anything about that ever coming out. And it's sad in a way, because I feel like I actually quite enjoy Halo 2 Anniversary multiplayer when it's on like Infection or something, because I think it's a really interesting premise to spawn you in with an assault rifle as opposed to a shotgun, which has been the case in every other Infection mode. And I think it kind of spices up the gameplay a little bit for someone, especially when you're playing the same rotation of Infection. Granted, I know there's a load of people that absolutely despise Infection, so I don't know if that's going to really resonate with a lot of people. I do see, it's difficult to say, because I don't have anything to compare Halo 2 Anniversary to, and I don't play it enough to have a really informed decision on it. I'm sure there's people out there, like really dedicated pro players from Halo 2 back in the day, that have serious gripes with Anniversary, but from a casual perspective, I really don't have that many problems with it. It's not my favorite. It's not the one I hate the most either. It's kind of in this weird limbo where I won't touch it, but I won't be like, oh, I don't want to play this. Like, I think sometimes when we're on game night, we'll play Rosham Train, which is on Halo 2 Anniversary. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, I don't think in any fact it's any different to playing, say, Halo 3. I think there's such a large similarity in those weapons now at this stage. I think even adding in the assault rifle has made it even more strikingly similar to Halo 3. I feel like Halo 3 is maybe a little bit more refined, and I prefer the art style of Halo 3 as opposed to Halo 2A. But like, bar that, there are like minimal differences. There's no equipment and whatnot and stuff like that. But yeah, no, Halo 2 Anniversary's multiplayer is fine. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't hate it. Very indifferent on it.
I think it's great for custom games, as you said. We also play Sumo, which is really, really fun. It's good. I tell you what, I had a lot of fun today, and because we're talking about the Master Chief Collection, and we're talking about 343 updating it and keeping these old games alive, and yeah, they're bringing out a lot of content for 3, and they're adding bits to Reach at the moment. So 3 has gotten a lot of love recently, and I think that you have to recognize that most people's favorite Halo game is Halo 3. It's the one they will be playing the most.
Yeah.
But saying that, they have added a game mode to the current multiplayer, I think just for this week. So I don't know if by the time this episode airs, it will still be on there. But it's called Escalation Slayer. Now, I've never seen it before. And basically, you all start off with the same weapon. And I think it was called Gun Game, I think, in Black Ops, where you kill someone and you get a new gun and you get like a higher tier. And I've had sort of the most fun on that than I've had on Halo in ages. And I think it's for Halo 2 Anniversary, Halo Reach, and Halo 4 at the moment. And it's really, really fun, because I really find the problem with competitive Halo multiplayer is that too easily you can get hold of the power weapons and control the map and be killing the same people constantly and just stay kind of in that top spot, and that's not really like, I like it to be kind of pretty even, or like an even playing field. So I like action sack. I like things like Fiesta, and even though sometimes in Fiesta you get like a terrible weapon setup, you spawn with like one plasma pistol and get immediately sniped or something. But to put on something like Escalation, where the weapons you get are directly rewarded for how well you do, like, it's been the most fun I've had on Halo multiplayer in ages, and I'm really glad to see them throw that in there, because mostly it's just like shotty snipers, griff ball, like all the rocket race like I've seen the same things pop up and up, and like they haven't attracted me back. But seeing this new game mode, I was like, oh yeah, I'll give that a try, and it was really fun. So I'll commend them for that. I think it's hard to talk about Halo without talking about the current state of Halo. And I've seen on Twitter recently a lot of people asking 343 to put Halo 5 support on PC. All of the Master Chief Collection, the whole 6 games in the franchise included in MCC, can now be played on PC, and multiplayer crossplay has been implemented as well. And I've seen the argument that lots of people have made is that you can play the Halo games from start to finish to get to Halo Infinite, but you can't play Halo 5 on PC. Like, imagine a PC player playing from start to finish and then find out they need to buy an Xbox to play Halo 5. And for all the love they've given MCC, you've got to question how hard would it be to put Halo 5 into MCC, or just put Halo 5 onto PC. Like, I'm sure they could be doing it right now. It could be in the works. I think they've actually said that they didn't have plans to, maybe I'm getting my wires crossed, they didn't have plans to optimize Halo 5 for Series X, I don't think. So whether they'd ever put it on PC, I don't know, but I know a lot of fans are calling for that at the moment. Do you personally I mean, I know this is going off Halo 2 a bit, but where do you see MCC going and the state of Master Chief Collection at the moment?
I think it's a difficult sort of one to think about in a sense, because you could kind of maybe make the point that, well, they have to do it to make sure the whole collection is on PC. But for the most part, really, if you think about it, like Halo 2 got put on PC, and then Halo 3 didn't see the light of day until MCC came onto PC, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that they'll do that again. Now, granted, that was under Bungie's time, so 343 might have a different approach to it. I would like to imagine, I think, that they might consider putting it on, because like Forge is already on PC for Halo 5. You can load that up. So I imagine they'd be able to, especially with PCs now, they'd definitely be able to optimize it in a certain facet for that. Whether it would run as well as people are hoping, I have no idea. I don't think it'd be something they'd be able to do in the span of a few months, because it seems like very much their priorities at the moment is keep MCC up to date until Infinite comes out, and then they're just going to work on Infinite, because I feel like they've kind of left 5 to the side now because it had such a poor reception, which is really unfortunate, because I think 5, like, for all its faults, has an unreal customs browser and a really good multiplayer setup. It's got the most dynamic Forge that we've ever seen in a Halo game, and it kind of seems just like a complete waste of like groundwork that they've put in, first of all, to make a really fun multiplayer experience, just for the sake of, Infinite will come out, and maybe it gets to the stage where people aren't too worried about it, but I completely didn't even think about the point that you made about people who are playing it on PC for the first time won't get to experience Halo 5, at least on PC, which I think is a really fair point to make, because, they're trying to attract in this new PC crowd, this audience, for the release of Halo Infinite. And for the people who are really going to stick around with it, first of all, to play all those campaigns, they're going to be a bit annoyed that they won't be able to experience Halo 5 without getting an Xbox One. And Xbox Ones are still kind of expensive. I think they're still in the €150 to €200 mark, so it's not an easy sell, to be honest, to get to buy an Xbox One solely for the purpose of playing the most loathed title in the franchise anyways. Like, that'd be me trying to convince someone to buy a PlayStation to play I don't know what game is bad on PlayStation. There's some, like, that'd be like me trying to convince someone to get a PlayStation to play Killzone Shadowfall. Like, who wants to fork out the money for that? Like, sure, the original Killzone games are actually really good, but like, that fourth one is very much not on the same level as the rest of them. So trying to convince someone to buy a PlayStation just for that would be a complete, like, I mean, if you would convince someone to that, honestly, you should go into sales. But like, I wouldn't be, sending anyone near it with a 10-foot pole. Yeah, I would like to see them put it on PC. I don't feel like it's going to happen for a while, though. Maybe a year or two at least.
I think saying that, I believe that if you've got an Android phone, you can currently play Halo 5 on your phone as long as you've got Game Pass.
And an Unreal internet connection.
Yes, yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I definitely can't play on my phone. I've even at I tried playing at my girlfriend's parents, and they have a significantly better Wi-Fi connection than I have, and the only thing I could just about get through was Return of the Obra Dinn, which is an indie game where you spend most of your time looking at still screens, doing like detective work. So it definitely wasn't good. I mean, I tried playing LA Noire because I was like, surely I can just put Doubt Lie, and it's not that demanding, but like the frames, it doesn't work. I've tried it doesn't work, and I'm sure that there are probably people living in cities in the UK that are fine. Good for you. I'm not in a city, so yeah, maybe probably better for US gamers on a much larger scale. But yeah. Anyway, I know we're coming, quite past the hour mark now, so I think we'll probably wrap up. I'll summarize my thoughts quickly on Halo 2. I will say that I don't think Halo 2 Anniversary, when you're looking at the kind of controversy or criticism that Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary got for the kind of choices and decisions they made with the graphics and the general look of things, those criticisms I haven't heard of Halo 2 Anniversary. It seems to have been very, very well received by Halo fans. I've heard nothing but praise for it. People really, really love it. And I think, for me, if you want to play something to get you really hyped for Infinite, I think it's a really good choice, because everything, the audio is just bursting with like really clear gun sounds, fantastic revamp of that Halo 2 soundtrack, and the visuals just so colourful, so bright. I think getting this game, you kind of understand how beautiful Halo can look. Granted, not the funnest campaign missions, but definitely the best Halo story in my opinion. So yeah, big praise for Halo 2. Go play it if you're a Halo fan. Odhrán, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I really like the narrative structure of Halo 2. Not so big of a fan of the level structure, but I think the story for that is enough to kind of, at least to play through it once, to experience it, I think is worth it. Again, multiplayer, I'm not too familiar with. I think there are better Halo multiplayers to play, to be honest. Although if you're looking for that sort of very much distinct Halo feel, go play the original, I'd say. I don't think 2A is going to give you too much of that. But besides that, I think it's a perfectly fine game. I think it's maybe a little bit overhyped in the Halo community because of the nostalgia some people have for it. But outside of that, I think, it's a perfectly serviceable game, and it's probably one of the better in the franchise. So yeah, go give it a go.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for joining us for another long discussion about Halo, but we enjoyed it. We hope you enjoy it as well. Next week, we should be looking at Outriders, which is a very new addition to Game Pass, the sort of big new multiplayer sort of looter shooter type game. Really interesting. Go and play that if you want, and come back next week and we'll talk about it. But for now, thank you for listening, and see you next time.